I still have this really big passion for reproductive justice for all people that are oppressed and marginalized. And I really advocate for bodily autonomy, regardless of your social position in life. And so, what I really want to do now is combine the spiritual tools that I've learned, primarily human design, but also a few others.
Everybody, welcome back. This week we have another member of the online business school coming to share her business birth story. And I'm really excited because I've picked up bits and pieces of your story over, it's been a year. You've been in the online business school for a year. So I've picked up bits and pieces. You come to most of our live sessions, which is, it's like when you're in college, you know how they say like, just show up and it'll make, even just showing up to class will make a difference. Whenever possible, you do show up. And I feel like I've gotten to know bits and pieces about you. So now I get to hear, and we get to hear more. So without further ado, I will turn it over and, tell us all the things. How did you get into where you are now in the birth world, but also beyond? Like, you are the definition of a multifaceted serial entrepreneur with like so many interests. And I actually love it. So I'm going to quiet and listen.
Okay, how I got started in the birth world. Well, like many people, it was because I got pregnant. And as I mentioned, I'm disabled, I'm a wheelchair user. My experience was not what I expected. I was living at the time in Austin, Texas, which is kind of known for being on the more liberal political side of things, a little bit more open-minded. I didn't think that I was going to have as many problems. I thought people would have more ideas and be a bit more accessible and accommodating than they were. I did have a great OBGYN. They were willing to work with me. But again, I kept coming up against this. We've never worked with anyone like you before. We'll do what we can, but we're going to play it by ear. And a lot of times I just got really frustrated with I don't want to have to figure this out with you. I want you to already know what you're doing. And I think for me, the final straw of really wanting to get involved on a professional level was when I went to the hospital-sponsored childbirth education class, and I was watching it, and it was your standard. Well, I don't know if I think there's kind of a template for hospital childbirth education where it's like you watch a video, you get a workbook, you talk about it with the facilitator, if it's in person. Mine was in person, and it just kind of, you practice positions with your partner. I didn't get to do any of that. As a wheelchair user, I was the only one with a obvious physical disability in the room. And, I was watching the video where she was saying, as it was going, just walk around to ease contractions and all this stuff. And I'm going, I can't walk. I'm thinking this, well, what am I supposed to do? And I knew it wasn't her fault. I knew that was just kind of the way the system was. One of the kind of events that made me feel really uncomfortable was during the class, she had everyone get down on the floor with their partner and practice pushing and breathing techniques. Well, that was a little bit hard for me to do, physically speaking. So the entire time, everyone around us is fake pushing and breathe, not actually fake pushing, but they're going, and my partner and I are just looking at each other I don't know, I basically sat in my chair and he sat next to me the entire time. And I just felt very much an outsider. And so after the class, after everyone had gone, because I didn't want to make a scene, I was much more about not making a scene than I am now. It's I turned 40 and I was who gives an F? But at the time, I was very conscious of not making a scene. And so I waited till everyone left, and I would say timidly at the time, because I have a lot of internalized ableism myself that I'm still working through as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so I thought, I don't want to be a burden on this person. So I'm just going to try to very politely tell them what I need or see if I can get some help. And I just said, do you have any resources maybe, or someone I could talk to about adapting this stuff to me? Because half of the things I couldn't do on the video, and I'm not going to be able to physically do some of the positions you recommended. And I'm not really sure about how my medications are going to interact with things, if I can have a physiological pelvic birth or if I'm going to need medication. Like, I had all these questions that weren't addressed because of my specific situation. And she just looked at me with the most sympathetic, like just sad, guilty look on her face and said, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have anything for you. And this was after months of going to like a supportive provider, OBGYN, like I said, but again, I was having to work with them to try to figure things out. And I guess that was just kind of the thing where I was like, I don't want to have to figure this out anymore. Like, I just want someone to tell me, like, here, this is, I'm familiar with disabilities. Let's look at your certain situations. Let's see what can be done. And so that was kind of the point where I was like, I want to become a doula so that no one else, and a childbirth educator so that no one else has to be told, we've never had anyone like you before, or we don't know what to do. Because it is the most disempowering feeling on the planet, at least for me it was. And so for the longest time, I thought, okay, I'm going to be a doula. I had a doula at my son's birth. And when I told people, because I was very impassioned about this was back in 2013, I was told, you can't do that because you can't physically assist. Now, this is people who, for the most part, don't know me, but also some that did and just made a lot of assumptions. This happens quite frequently with disability. People think they know best, but what I've learned from personal experience and just in the disabled community is that the person with the disability knows how to handle themselves best. But at the same time, like I said, I had a lot of internalized ableism. I had people I was counting on for advice. And they said, you can't do that. Like, you can't physically assist someone. So that's not possible for you. So I kind of dropped it and shifted into different careers for a time, all sort of centering around children and, education and babies. there's always a thread. And then COVID happened. And I realized I could do things online. And that was kind of a game changer. I started looking into, oh my gosh, what would this look like to do digitally? And would anyone want doula services if they don't have someone massaging their back or doing all the physical things? That's how I found you, actually. I was looking for a way to be a doula, but completely virtually, which it's still kind of rare. You usually have kind of a mix between in-person and virtual. And I was like, no, I just want to do completely virtual because I'm not able to drive. So that would be difficult for public transportation to go back and forth financially, and also just client location. What if the client's house wasn't accessible? What about stairs? These are things that I think about all the time. This is kind of a running commentary in my head. So I was like, okay, 100% virtual, and no one that I could see was doing it. And then I found you and I thought, okay, so this is a way that I might be able to make things work. I wasn't sure, but I was open. And I think that's the biggest thing that has kind of helped me go forward, is just being open to whatever comes. And honestly, at that point, I didn't know what I wanted it to look like. As far as 100% virtual, I didn't know. I knew I wanted to support people. I didn't know how. I didn't know a lot of the things, but I knew that I needed someone to help me because I knew I didn't know stuff. And so I signed up for the online business school. And honestly, for that first year, there were so many ideas running through my head that I didn't know, which ones to focus on, where to go. I did get some very valuable advice from you in the group sessions where I would go one way and then I would research it and go, I don't know. And then I would go another way, and just, it kept going on like that. So the ideas kept coming, things kept flowing, but nothing really became concrete. And then I enrolled in birthing advocacy doula trainings. I have an online program for full spectrum doulas, postpartum, childbirth education. Of course, I did all three. I love to learn. I have a background, both my parents were teachers. My mother's a retired school teacher, my dad's a retired professor. I'm just naturally kind of drawn towards knowing as much as I can. So I'm actually still in the process of certifying with them, only because I never really take the straight direct route anywhere. And so a lot of things have kind of come up as I'm doing the work, and I follow those threads and then come back. Luckily, they have the ability to certify over 18 months instead of the standard 12. So cross your fingers. So I enrolled in that training, and that really kind of helped ground me in what I had hoped to offer for clients. And this happens sometimes. As I was going along, I was like, man, I just really, since childbirth education was the thing that really kind of tipped it for me, that was where I really wanted to focus. That's where I really I wanted to do the emotional support of the doula, but I wanted to do the educational piece of the childbirth educator. And so it kind of shifted into something different than what I originally planned. And, I started getting ideas for what if I create a childbirth education class, a virtual one for people with disabilities. Their partners might have disabilities. Maybe they don't, but their partner does. Also neurodivergence. I mean, I'm neurodivergent as well. I'm intersectional AF. The only thing, I am not a person of color, but I have many, many intersections. I also have some privileges as a cis white woman. So I also understand that, and I'm trying to use that to lift other voices that may not be heard as easily. So anyway, I got on my soapbox so much I got off track. But yeah, so I'm actually in the process of seeing what that childbirth education course would look like, what could go into that. And I've been talking to people, disabled parents and neurodivergent parents and everyone, just to see what they would want. And so again, that's sort of in the works. What happened unexpectedly, and again, I feel like my whole journey has been like, oh, there's this unexpected thing, and then I follow it because it lights me up. And this comes actually to where I ended up. Before I got into the doula trainings, before I met you, before everything, well, not everything, my son had been born. It was 2019. I discovered human design from a coach friend of mine who said, hey, have you heard of this thing? And I was like, no, what's this? And of course, my curiosity got the better of me again. And I sort of ended up studying intensely under two very masterful teachers. It's been 4 years now, and I'm still passionate about human design. And as you might know, when I come to the calls in online business school, I am constantly like, oh, what's the human design angle on this? And, oh, this sounds like this. It just kind of happens. I'm just so passionate about it that in one of the recent conversations that we had in one of the group calls, one of the members was having an issue about a decision. And I thought, human design really helps with decisions. How about doing like human design and spirituality and stuff, like using spiritual tools for doulas? Because I also, in addition to human design, I also use tarot, gene keys, astrology, all the things that kind of go along with it, the I Ching. And so like basically human design for doulas with a little added extra spice was thrown in, but not just doulas, birth workers in general. I still have this really big passion for reproductive justice for all people that are oppressed and marginalized. And I really advocate for bodily autonomy, regardless of your social position in life. And so what I really want to do now is combine the spiritual tools that I've learned, primarily human design, but also a few others, because again, I always love to shake it up every once in a while. So I don't want to confine it to just human design, but I want to use spiritual tools to help birth workers who are feeling like they're at a crossroads with some sort of decisions. They've been in it for a while. They might have started with one vision, but maybe something changed, or they're just feeling like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. Like I started out really like on fire, and now I'm not feeling it. So using those tools to kind of help people realign, sort of like a spiritual chiropractor, realign to get this renewed sense of mission and purpose. A lot of that may intersect, it may not, but it may, as far as with my vision also of supporting people who are contributing to the larger conversation of reproductive health and reproductive justice and bodily autonomy and rights, and being able to do whatever the F we want with our own bodies. And so that's my contribution. And also using these tools in a way that's very applicable, very practical, If you know anything about human design, I'm a 5-1, which means I use my information and research as a basis for practical solutions. I'm also very spiritual, so of course I had to combine the two, right? It has to be spirituality, but in a way that really can be embodied and used for the greater good in a very practical way.
For anybody listening who's not familiar with human design, which my guess is if you listen to this podcast, you've probably heard me talk about it and you may have heard the basics, right? And you might have to correct me because, I don't have the nuanced depth knowledge of it, even though I'm also a one line and I like my information. I'm a little bit earlier on in my journey. I say I'm about 2 years in, but I haven't specifically studied under, it's been more of like self-taught and
this is a game changer, by the way. This is Human Design Revealed. This is what Ra'uruhu, the guy who first sort of revealed human design to the world, his first students. So from 1993 to 1997, this is what he taught. Before the types were invented, and I'm going to say invented because I feel like that was kind of an add-on, but that again is my own personal opinion. Don't know like for sure because he's departed, but it was before the types came into existence. We'll put it that way.
Right.
And so I work in human design a lot differently than other people might. And let me just, what is human design? Okay. Because I keep talking about human design. For me, it's a snapshot, a map, a representation, a symbol of your kind of energy of how you interact with the world, your subtle energy, your energetic signature before the world kind of has impact on you and conditions you. It's not a manual, it's a representation of what's possible. It's a story. It's a possible story. I like story much better. It's a possible storyline for how your life could be, how it could end up. You ultimately have the responsibility and the privilege of decisions and choice and free will. So it's not like this is just how it is. And also, like I said, it's a snapshot of the day that you were born. And what I've learned through one of my mentors that I'm working with is that it changes. There's something called holographic human design, and that is something from my mentor, Kim Gould. She's amazing. She started working in human design in 2004, so she's one of the very early adopters. And holographic human design, what's different about it is it's very fluid in that says that life changes. You're connected in human design, you're connected to energetics through things called neutrinos, right? These are those things that they're tiny, tiny, tiny little particles that you can't really see. And there's tons and tons of them, very scientific, I know. There's tons and tons of them every second going through the planets, going through you, and they pick up information as they go. And that's they pick up information from the planets, they go into us. I mean, that's how we're all sort of connected to everything around us. Are these neutrinos. And it was scientifically proven, I believe in 97 or 98 that these exist. It's not hypothetical or theoretical, they actually exist. And so holographic human design, what it says is that it uses astrology and secondary progression, which says that one day equals 1 year. So the first, let's say 100 days of your life would at some point repeat itself to your first 100 years. And so you can kind of see this parallel of how things change over time, what your year might look like if you were to put it on top of that snapshot that you've got, or if you were to look at the weather. So the thing about holographic human design that I love is that it is internal. It's about evolution and internal growth. In astrology and human design, there's something called a solar return. And the solar return charts are more about external factors, like the celestial weather, like everything that's going on externally that might affect you, right? Holographic human design says these blueprints were sort of stamped in when you were born, so they're repeating themselves so you can evolve and learn lessons. And, and the thing about evolving and learning lessons is you don't discard everything that came before, right? You still have that blueprint that you were born with. You still have all the experiences that you have as a person moving through the world. You still have all the things, you still are socially located. The thing human design doesn't take into account, and that I really want to work with, is that it doesn't take social location like, your race, your sex, your gender, all those things, those are on top of your human design, right? So I in no way want to say, oh, everything's possible if you just do this, because the reality is we are fixed in a certain place and point with certain characteristics that are not addressed by the human design chart. And that's part of the reason I want to really work with doulas, especially if they have other parts to their identity that they want to address. For example, I identify with the LGBTQ community as well. And so that, the experiences of that play into how we interact and how that energy is used. And that can only really be addressed when you're talking to a person who might understand that experience. But again, I digress. The solar return, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about really quickly, is it's one of those things where people say, oh, you can predict the future, you can do that. And the holographic human design, oh, you can predict the future. You can do. Yes and no. I want to be really clear about this because it is, to me, potential. Everything is potential. Nothing is really written into stone. It is the way things can go if you are open and willing and able. Sometimes able is a really big key to do some of the work that's required to really look at some things you might be holding on to and get some of that crap out, to get to the places where you can meet that energy that's in your solar return or that's in your holographic human design chart. It's not a given that you will get there. It's about taking personal responsibility for your life and for your actions. And I think that the people that I would want to work with are especially kind of in that space anyway, of taking personal responsibility and really looking at themselves. And those are the kinds of people that really rock my socks, are the ones that take personal responsibility for who they are, really want to show up fully in the world, fully embodied, and make a difference. And I say want to work because here's the thing is this is my business birth story, but my business is still like maybe it hasn't been born yet. It's still incubating. My goal is to actually release it in February 2023 as a love letter to birth workers who are on a mission, because I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to help them fully show up with their energetics. I'm saying energetics sounds very woo. Actually, the name that I have tentatively come up with for my business, because things always change, is applied woo, because it's applied, it's practical, it's like applied mathematics, but talking about spirituality, right? So I would love for people to show up fully embodied in order to really hold the complexities and be there for clients to really forward their mission, whatever that might be. If their mission happens to intersect with mine on reproductive justice, I would love to work together to kind of see how that could turn into a larger movement. I really want this to be, even if it's not direct, right? Even if the missions are not exact matching, how can we work together to make it so that birth work and just sexual health and reproductive health, how can we make it so that it's more accessible, more inclusive? And by accessible, I mean not only physically accessible, but financially accessible. How can we work together to make this a more just and equitable society? And so my work doing the human design with birth workers is just kind of a conduit for a larger vision. So
As you know, I'm a note taker, so I was like
I
writing things.
do. Yeah. I'm just hoping, like, part of me, and this is some deconditioning that I have to do. I was always told that I talked too much as a kid. And so I'm always like, oh gosh, like I know I'm being interviewed, but part of me is just like, but the thing is, I don't want to rein it in anymore. Like I'm me and I have lots to say. I have lots of ideas. And in addition to the childbirth education course, I want to make a tarot deck or an oracle deck or something like that, like just to get the creative juices flowing. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm too much and I love it. I'm starting to love it.
I love it. I love how you have, like, and you mentioned, I've been in there for a year in the online business school. Ideas kept coming, flowing, nothing concrete yet. And you have all of this knowledge and some of the stuff we didn't even have a chance to speak about yet, but you have such a diverse skill set and trainings across every board, right? And
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just give you the list. So bachelor's degree is in public relations and marketing with a minor in German because I speak 5 languages fluently, German being the second most fluent. And then we've got a master's degree. I have a partial master's degree in speech pathology, focusing on school speech pathology. I have a partial master's degree in world religion. I'm a seminary dropout. I have a completed master's degree in early childhood education, birth to 8. I was a preschool teacher for a few years and then ended up doing things in the user design, like website space. I ended up still paying off that student loan, even though I didn't end up going that path. But it taught me something really valuable. And I think that's the thing is like everything, I have a lot of 3 lines in my overall chart. I know you're a 1-3, and that's all about experimenting and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And what doesn't work is not awful or bad. It's meant to teach a lesson to others. And so I have a lot of those as well. And actually, it's kind of personal to me because my son is also a 1-3. And so I always tell him that mistakes have a purpose, right? And they're not really mistakes. So I've started calling them feedback. Oh, look, there's some feedback, right? I've done a whole bunch of things. So the UX stuff, I was a middle school teacher for a while, middle school English teacher. I was a high school teacher for a while. So I basically taught everything from pre-K to 11th or 12th grade. Proofreading and editing is one of the things I've helped people put together, books, memoirs, that kind of stuff. If you look at the path I've taken, and this is interesting because, again, if anyone listening knows about human design, I have a defined G center, which is direction, which also means I can help other people find direction, which is why my new business is so perfect, I think, is that I can help you find that direction, right? The thing that ties everything together for me, the direction that I see, is that I am all about meaning making and creativity, and in a sense, having that meaning be applicable to life in general, like not just some theoretical thing, because while that might be nice for certain circumstances, for me, I need to be able to really put it to use in some way. And I don't necessarily mean it has to be like, it's not that spirituality is not valid on its own or that creativity is not valid just for existing, because I feel like we are valid for existing. You know, you matter because you are, right? But if I can't see a way to alchemize it, to make it something that makes a difference, that makes people feel or something, then I don't really want much to do with it. Interestingly, Karen Curry Parker, who's another person in the human design space, calls generators, which I am, alchemists. So I feel like a really strong connection to that.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, and I feel like that's very much in the birth industry. I feel like a lot of birth workers are very motivated, and it makes sense. 70% of the population are generators. So probably 70% of the doulas are generators. So they are really hanging on to mission. We're very mission driven. And even outside of the birth industry, like the people that I tend to attract are mission driven, heart centered entrepreneurs who give a crap, who are not selling shoelaces. Like we are.
Right.
Like we are doing something and shoelaces are important. We got to have shoelaces.
Right. But yeah, I'm a big picture thinker. One thing that's unique about me that I, again, am trying to figure out and embrace as I go is that in human design, you have, if you look at charts, there are 4 arrows by your head that kind of talk about how you digest information, how you interact with the world in various ways. And for me, I am what's called a quad right, which is 4 arrows pointing right, which means I am, I think, the rarest of the types when it comes to the arrows, because I'm all receptive all the time. I take in, again, a ton of information, but I can't tell you a lot of times where I get it unless I deliberately bookmark it or deliberately write it down, because it's coming at me all the time. And one of my life lessons, according to my human design, is actually to learn how to receive. And so it's interesting to have that sort of configuration where I'm built to receive and yet am having a problem or have had a problem in the past receiving.
Which we've talked about, like me being quad left, right? Like all 4 of my are pointed left. So I have this very logical, like I'm hearing you talk, I'm taking notes about all of the things that you're really passionate about. And in my head, I'm like, well, you could do it like this and like this. And then during this season, you can focus on this thing, build the course, get the, childbirth education, the virtual CBE course out that specifically speaks to folks with a disability and folks with neurodivergence, and create it. It's done. My projector is showing because it's like, how can we make this efficient? How can we bring it some structure and move the needle forward? Right. So like in my head, I see the logic. And I think that's one of the things that you came into the container for.
Because I was like strategy. I don't do strategy. I need strategy. And that's the thing is like, it's interesting when I used to do human design readings as well, just for coaches before I ended up, I've done over 100 for coaches. When I first started out, when I said I dove in, I dove in. I started in 2019. By 2020, I was doing 100 readings.
Okay, hold on a second. You've done 100 human design readings for coaches, and you said your business is at infancy stage. I disagree. Infancy would mean I'm brand new. I haven't yet done a reading. Like you are at least in grade school with your human design segment.
Okay. Well, I meant more that the ideas coming together, the synthesis of it is new, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the people that I would attract would be quad lefts because they would be attracted to the fact that I'm very flowy and receptive and I can give you advice, right? I can give you strategy in the moment. And that's the thing is like, I'm a very in the moment. What was said about quad rights at one point is we are to be used for our information. So the things that we take in are meant to be given out to the people around us. So be very careful with whom you surround yourself, because those are the people that are going to be drawing information out of you. So I really loved working with coaches and people who are really involved in self-awareness and really bringing themselves over time to spaces, because I was like, that's how I want to be. But I wouldn't be able to know what to say or do until I was in a conversation with them, until I was, in it. And then it was like, oh yeah, well, I found this information from God knows where, but here, use it, right? I am meant to be used for my information.
Right. And I feel like something that you touched on too, that was really important is you're very mission driven, right? And so one of your big, very important themes is reproductive justice, which many people listening to this would agree and are on the same wavelength with you. And also that we need all different types of helpers. Like everybody can't be on the front line. Everybody can't be the ones doing one specific job. Everybody can't necessarily be the doula in the birth room for various reasons. Sometimes they shouldn't be. Sometimes like we're just not certain people, like my design, right? Like my energetic circuitry is not optimal to be in the birth room. And I know that now, right? But how can I still help? You can still help. We need help on every front. And so that's part of where like, I feel like this is one of the ways that you'll be able to help away from the front line, right? Is helping doulas, helping birth workers really have that understanding of how they optimally can function in the world in a way that really suits their structure and helps them thrive. The word thrive is coming, like, how can I really thrive of not feeling burnt out, not experiencing adrenal fatigue, and doing things that are not really in alignment with our best way. And so those one size fits alls just are not helpful for everybody, for a lot of people,
Well, I mean, here's the thing is that I am the literal personification of not one size fits all, right? One of the things that I joke about is that my incarnation cross, which again, we can get into if people are interested, is basically kind of the energy that you bring into the world as you interact with people. It's kind of your purpose and mission, but I try to tell people not to take it like as, this is just the way it is. It's not meant to be a box. It's meant to be more like just a flow, right? I mean, it's meant to be options and possibilities. But yeah, my incarnation cross is actually the left angle cross of defiance, which means I'm meant to come in and shake things up in a creative way. Now, not necessarily like overturn entire governments and like all this kind of stuff, but just take something that already exists and kind of change it a little bit, change perspectives, change the way things are done, something like that. And I joke that, I mean, my existence, my body, my person is defiant. Just existing for me is defiant because I don't fit into the myth of normal. And I call it the myth of normal because everyone has their own normal. And I think that's one of the reasons I had such a hard time growing up was that, you know, with internalized ableism is that this idea of everything has to look a certain way or be a certain way was really kind of driven into me. And I'm not faulting anyone for that. It's just societal conditioning, right? And so now that I'm old enough to understand that it doesn't have to be that way, I think that's why human design hits so hard because it's called the science of differentiation, right? It's differentiation. And I'm like, yes, like, let's all take our uniqueness and like use it together for something amazing.
Yeah. And I hadn't heard it called that before. Again, I haven't done as a one line, it's embarrassing to admit that I haven't thoroughly studied, right?
It's okay. It's what I'm here for. So
yeah, right. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And I'm over here like, okay, this quarter, we're going to do this. Then that quarter, you're going to do that. And I'm thrilled that we get another year where you're going to be in the container. So we get to continue this incubation because really, I mean, I had this moment the other day when I was writing something and I had this moment of like realizing that I feel like there's this misconception about business that you feel like, okay, once I get it all set up, it's just going to basically run itself. Like things will kind of, but it's what, 5.5 years ish that I've been doing online business. And what I can say is I still feel like I'm in that period. I still feel like I'm in the early phases. Like there's always going to be, if you're open, like you said earlier, if you're open to doing things differently, if you're open to going deeper, if you're open to making changes and exercising your free will to move closer to one of your higher possibilities, like what is the highest possibility available for me? And using, your free will to decide like, okay, I'm willing to do that, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it might be a little scary. And it's not what I've been conditioned to believe is how I'm supposed to do things.
Right.
When you make that decision, it's another constant learning curve, right? And you get in and you let, and also as a 3-line, I forget you said there was a specific word that you told your son, who's a 1-3, that feedback. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I look at it very much like I've had to shift a lot lately and realize like, this is all trial and lesson. Like, this is exactly why I'm here. I'm here to fall forward. I'm here to make mistakes. I'm here to try things and tell you. And with the information line, with the 1 line, I learn, and then I go try. And then I come back and tell my people, okay, here's what we tried. Here's the things you could try. And even though things might not work for me, or they work really well or whatever, it doesn't matter. It may or may not work and land on my clients, like people and members of the online business school. Like, here's the different things we can try. But one of the big things I like to bring is this opportunity and this invitation for people to be open and to try things. And so like the fact that you're willing to do that is, to me, it is one of the most profound pieces of transformation. Like, if you're not willing to open up and try and go a little deeper, I agree that it's really hard to work with somebody who's like, 4 1s, people set in their way. Correct. I have a 4-1 child and I saw,
my goodness.
I know.
Okay. One of the things
about Tom Brady, right? Like, I saw this person doing, I don't really care so much about like celebrity, they're people, right? But one of the things I find really interesting is like, what's their human design? And then I just look at how they navigate, like how they move through the world. So somebody did a human design reading on some YouTuber, I don't remember, but it was on Tom Brady. And my son loves Tom Brady. And they were like, that man was never leaving football. He's 4-1. So whether his wife thought he might be retiring, like if he decided he was doing it, it was happening, period. Like, they don't move unless they want to move. Mm-hmm. You will not move them. You will not do anything to move them. They have to want to move. It has to come from them. And advice that I got with my 4-1 at one point was, you're not going to mold him. Allow him to mold himself to you. And I was like, whew, it's so fascinating, right?
So interestingly, and this is somewhat related, but when I was growing up, this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. I guess that's showing my age a little bit. My mother always said, you're going to need to adapt to the world because the world's not going to adapt to you. Well, I know that was well-meaning advice, but at this point, I'm kind of like, no, they can adapt to me. It's fine. Like, and that's kind of the 4-1 is like, no, they can totally adapt to me. It's totally fine. And it's not meant to be a selfish thing. 4-1s are on a very fixed path They just don't know what the path is sometimes. And one of the things that I wanted to comment on, just going back a little bit, is, you were talking about trying things and it might be a little scary, but doing it anyway. One of the things that I can help with as far as making it a little less scary, because we've got enough scary shit in the world. So one of the things I can do is look at other energies that you might hold in your human design chart. We can look at other modalities. Like I said, I also do like the holographic human design and astrology and gene keys, which, if you've never heard, is also, it was originally based in human design and then sort of branched off into its own thing. It's fascinating. And tarot, and just using like the different modalities to kind of find a way to make things a little less scary, to make things basically more aligned to you. And I try not to use aligned too much because I feel like it's overused a lot in certain circles, but to make sure that something fits. So you're not trying to, I always get this visual, and maybe it's just me, but I get this visual of someone trying to fit into skinny jeans who hasn't worn them in like 10 years. Like, but it used to fit. It's totally, I can lay down on the bed, I could get some pliers and tweezers and do this, right? Don't try to do that with your life. That's not good. It will hurt, right? And so trying to make it a little less, like maybe you like that style of jeans, right? Great, get a size that fits. Right? It makes it a lot less painful. And I guess I'm your spiritual style guru. I don't know. Like,
love it.
That's kind of the thing, right? Just find something that fits.
Yeah.
Don't try to stuff yourself into something that you think will work or you think that will look good based on outdated ideas.
Like the example that just keeps popping in right now is, I've heard this in the coaching industry sometimes, like, if you want to grow a business and get clients online, do this 30-day Facebook Live challenge and it's going to change everything.
No.
And I'm
if you're
like,
not a generator,
well, and if you don't have severe, there's people who, like, the thought of going live, like I've had clients who the thought of, like, they get hot sweats when they post to Instagram because they're afraid they're going to accidentally hit the live button. And so, there's a really big difference between I'm a little uncomfortable, but it feels exciting, right? That's a big difference between that and this like debilitating fear of like panic mode, right? Like, oh my God.
Well, that's the thing. And you said, 70% of the population are generators. If it's not a hell yes, if it's a hell no, if you're like breaking out into sweats, don't do it. For goodness sake, like don't. Right? That's a hell no. You
just brought me back to something. You just brought me back. She must have been a generator. I had somebody who did some of my early website work with me. And I remember on the discovery call, see, I didn't know much I didn't have the level of discernment then that I do now. This was 5.5 years ago. And I remember on the discovery call very clearly, she said, so do you have any questions or are you ready to get started right now? And I'm like, well, I kind of need a little bit of, I need to process. I'd like to process everything you presented with me, right? She gave me some ideas of ways we could work together. And she's like, well, listen, if you're not a hell yes, then you're a hell no. And as a projector and maybe just the way I'm built, I was like, ew, I really don't like that.
No,
it was a lot of pressure. And it felt very pressury, but I can see how in other contexts, it's a really helpful indicator for generators.
Yeah, if she were talking to a generator, but see, the thing is, there are other reasons that doesn't work. Don't even get me started about why that doesn't work. Like the pushiness does not, no. It's basically like pickup lines. You've got this agenda, you're going with a pickup line, and it's more than likely it's not going to work, right? Yes. You gotta like have a relation, like some type of like communication bond relationship, something before there's a yes or no. Yeah. Even with me, right? If somebody did that with the hell yes or hell no, I'd be like, no, I need to look up some information first. Because again, one with information, right? I need to, and I'm an emotional authority. So I need time to actually sit through my emotions and be like, okay, I'm excited now, but am I going to be excited in 24 hours?
Or if you're a reflector. Right? Reflectors for big decisions need a lunar cycle, right? So I met a reflector yesterday and I had pulled her chart because we were looking at some things for potentially, working together in a different capacity. I pulled her chart and she was a reflector. And I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating. But again, like reflectors, 1% of the population need a full lunar cycle. So like about a month, 28 days-ish.
Yeah, it can be less. It can actually be less. It really depends on the hugeness of the decision.
Right.
But the point is they definitely need more than like a 30-minute phone call, right? And the
And
thing is,
online selling does not teach you, a lot of the online world doesn't teach business owners that different people need such different experiences for processing whether or not, when or if they're going to join you in whatever it is. Like, people need their space. And a lot of the online business world does not teach that in marketing. The marketing message is like pressure, 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 put artificial timestamps, make them make it.
Fear never wins. Fear never wins. And space is creative and abundant and generative, and you should give people space. I mean, I'm a big fan of space regardless of, like, you know, the situation. Give people space to breathe, to think, to ask questions, to whatever. Don't be pushing because you're afraid you're not going to make the sale. Like, it's not about you making the sale.
I just had such an idea too. And for birth workers who are listening, what I think would be helpful to, like, you know, bring us in, wrap it up, is like, if you're a birth worker or even beyond, if you're wondering, like, how will my human design actually help me in the world so I'll know myself better? Okay. But I feel like even through this lens, it applies across the board when you're doing business, no matter what kind of industry you're in. You can look at it through this lens of, like, there's not one way to sell online. There's not one way to present your work to people and be like, here's the opportunities to work with me. There's not one way to do that. And when you know your human design, I feel like the deeper you understand yourself, the better you understand your ideal way of presenting your work to the world. Because if it's like making you sick to your stomach, uncomfortable at doing it the way that Sally taught us how to do it. Sorry if there's any Sallys listening, but, you know, let's say like Sally, the digital marketing expert, said to do it, then, like, that's a hint that maybe it's not for you. So there's so many angles that I feel like having this understanding of yourself can be really helpful. So having said all of that, I'll include in the show notes where you want folks to reach out to you, where they can, you know, connect with you and inquire about a reading and beyond, or stay connected in terms of reproductive justice, or if they want to, you know, whatever reason they'd like to connect. I'll include a link in the show notes. It was really, really nice to get to know you more and just to hear more about your whole story. Like, I appreciate your time in a big way.
Absolutely. I love talking about this stuff. And I just love talking with you. I mean, period. We just tend to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and it's great. But yeah, I think just respecting that people are different is a huge thing. And it's a huge humility to bring into work, regardless of what industry you're in. And like you were saying, it's not about specifically being for birth workers. I'm a huge fan of the quote from Audre Lorde that says, you know, there are no single issue lives, right? So whether you want it for business, or like, you might come for a human design reading for business and it might end up being more about how you live your life. Well, that's going to bleed into your business. Maybe bleed's not the right but that's going to affect your business, right? It's all connected. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it doesn't feel like, well, what am I going to do? That if you feel pulled in any way, like there's a curiosity or a hell yes, reach out anyway. Like, I'm not going to pressure you. I've already said, like, I understand that people need time, and I'm about building relationships, even if it's just for the duration of a reading, or like before, like, I really want to get to know what it is people need. It's really important to me to help them on a deeper level, and not just like, oh, I need to make this sale, I need to do this. No, I don't. And I know I'm going over a little bit, but I got to say this because this has just been on my mind and on my heart and all sorts of things. People say charge your worth. Don't do that. And here's why. I know it's controversial opinion, but here's why. You're worthy because you are. Your finances are completely separate from that. Now, will it affect your finances? Sure. Like, as you feel more competent, as you feel more capable, you can charge more, but that has nothing to do with your inherent worthiness. So money is an energetic resource to be used for, you know, whatever you want, need. It's okay to want things too, but don't charge your worth because if I charge too low, does that mean I don't, you know, what does that mean? Don't make it mean so much about yourself. Just understand that you're worthy because you are, and that money is a resource to be used, right? It's a resource to be used however you see fit for whatever your purposes are, whatever your mission is. So I just wanted to say that real quick, because I keep hearing the charge your worth conversation, and those two things should not be linked. They should not even like wave to each other. They're going to affect each other, but in a very indirect way, and they really shouldn't be so intimately connected.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Because I mean, yeah, the example is like, so somebody who's working in housekeeping earning 40,000 a year is not worthy of the same anything in this world as somebody who's a CEO. I disagree, right? So 100% on
Absolutely.
board. And thank you for that,
Absolutely.
because I do feel like that's a really helpful thing to talk about. It's one of those, distortion was the word that came in while you were talking, like it's just that the industry unfortunately feels a little distorted in that area.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Well,
that.
it feels a little bit like the prosperity gospel in some ways of other people. I don't agree with it. I'm very passionate about making sure that people know they're worthy regardless of how much money they make. And I have, in human design, I have an undefined heart center, which has to do with worth and value. And
Mhm.
so there was this time where I thought, oh, I'm, I don't think enough of myself. And that might be part of why I was charging below what I should have, like what I felt was right. But it doesn't mean that if I charge more, that I am more worthy. It just
Mhm.
means that I finally realized what a badass I am, and now I'm going to charge this amount of money. It's more
Right.
about self-realization than worth,
Mhm.
right? It's about self-realization of your worth and that it is separate from money. Like for me, that's the whole thing. It's about the self-realization.
I'm going to share something in the online business school membership community, an idea that I had. I wrote it down. So I'm going to tag you in it and I'll share it in there for you, because it's a little something just to give you something. You can take it or leave it. You know how I am.
Okay, yeah.
So again, I appreciate you so much. And we get to see each other again. Yeah, we have a session this week in the group.
Is
So
it?
I'll see you
Yes.
tomorrow.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
All right. Everyone have a good week. Stacy, I'll see you tomorrow,
See you
and
tomorrow.
enjoy, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.